For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood in silence, refusing to give up its secrets. Ancient Greeks thought it was built by slaves. Medieval travelers thought it was built by giants. Modern conspiracy theorists say it was built by aliens. Hollywood has spent a century dramatizing every possible theory. And through all of it, through every speculation, every documentary, every wild hypothesis, actual scientists have been quietly doing something far more extraordinary than theorizing. They have been proving, one discovery at a time, one ancient papyrus, one satellite radar scan, one cosmic particle at a time, and what they have now assembled, from a lost river found buried under the Sahara Desert, from a 4,500-year-old diary written by a man who actually worked on the pyramid, from cameras inserted into hidden chambers nobody knew existed, and from particle physics technology that scans the inside of ancient stone using rays from outer space, is not a theory. It is evidence. Real, physical, verified, undeniable evidence. This is the story of how science finally answered one of the oldest questions in human history. And the answer is more extraordinary than any alien ever could have been. Let us begin where the story actually starts. Not in Egypt, not at Giza, but at a remote, sun-baked site on the coast of the Red Sea, 240 kilometers from the Great Pyramid, where in the spring of 2013 a French archaeologist named Pierre Tallet was excavating a series of man-made caves carved into limestone cliffs. These caves had been used, thousands of years ago, to store wooden boats, and stuffed between the limestone blocks near the entrance to the storage spaces, lodged there so long ago that nobody had touched them since the reign of a pharaoh, were rolls of papyrus, hundreds of fragments, some a few feet long, some in pieces, all of them written in hieroglyphics and hieratic script, all of them dated by the inscriptions within them to approximately the 26th year of the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, the man who ordered the Great Pyramid built. These documents are now known as the Wadi el-Jarf papyri. They are the oldest papyrus documents ever discovered in Egypt, and among them is something that Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass, who spent decades excavating the Giza Plateau and served as Egypt's Minister of Antiquities, called the greatest discovery in Egypt in the 21st century. A logbook, a work diary, written in black and red ink by a man named Merer, a chief inspector who oversaw a crew of approximately 200 men whose job was to transport the white limestone blocks that would become the outer casing of the Great Pyramid from the quarry at Tura, across the Nile, through a network of canals, to the building site at Giza, day by day, trip by trip. For months at a time, 4,500 years ago, Merer recorded his work in meticulous detail, and those records have now survived to tell us exactly who was doing the work. One entry reads simply and matter-of-factly, Inspector Merer left Tura South with his team on a boat filled with limestone blocks to Akhet Khufu, spending the night at Sheikh Khufu. Akhet Khufu was the ancient name of the Great Pyramid itself, meaning horizon of Khufu. The diary is not a legend. It is not a myth. It is a daily logbook written by a real man, in the voice of a real man, describing a real operation that was happening at the exact time the Great Pyramid was being built. Merer's diary confirms that the logistics of pyramid construction were not chaotic or mysterious. They were extraordinarily well organized. Workers operated on a rotating schedule, 3 teams cycling through assignments every 10 days. Materials were tracked, quantities recorded, journeys timed. The pyramid was not a supernatural feat. It was a project managed with a precision and administrative sophistication that, as one researcher described the diary's logistics, gives an overall impression of extreme modernity. The diary also names names. Merer reports to a man he identifies as the noble Ankh-Haf, serving as director of the entrance to the pool of Khufu. That name, Ankh-Haf, is known to Egyptology. He was Khufu's half-brother. His bust sits in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, painted with such realism that he looks almost alive. For the first time in history, the diary gave archaeologists a named, identifiable person confirmed to be overseeing the construction of the Great Pyramid during its completion phase. This was not a nameless mass of enslaved labor. This was a bureaucracy, a hierarchy, a project with managers, inspectors, team leaders, and workers, all recorded in writing, all paid in rations, all operating under a chain of command that stretched from the quarry to the pharaoh's half-brother. And who were those workers? The answer to that question was provided not by papyrus, but by bones and bread. Beginning in the 1990s, archaeologist Mark Lenner and his team from the Ancient Egypt Research Associates began excavating the workers' village at Giza, the settlement that housed the people who built the pyramids. What they found demolished the slave narrative completely and permanently. The workers ate well. The animal bones found in the village show they consumed beef, sheep, and goat, protein-rich diets that no slave labor force in the ancient world would have been given. The bones also show evidence of medical care. Workers who suffered broken bones during construction had those fractures set and healed, meaning the site had organized medical support for its workforce. The village contained bakeries producing industrial quantities of bread and breweries producing beer, both of which were staple payment and rations in ancient Egypt. Administrative records found at Giza list the food deliveries to the workers. 10 cattle and 10 sheep slaughtered daily to feed the permanent workforce, with quantities scaled up during peak construction periods when tens of thousands of seasonal workers arrived. Those seasonal workers were not slaves dragged to Giza in chains. They were farmers, laborers from across Egypt who came to Giza during the annual Nile flood season, when the fields were underwater and agricultural work was impossible, to contribute to the construction of monuments they believed would ensure the prosperity of their land and their own afterlife. They came in rotating crews, worked for defined periods, and returned home. The permanent skilled workforce, the stonemasons, the surveyors, the foremen, the logisticians, lived at Giza year-round in organized housing, with their own cemetery nearby. Zahi Hawass has excavated that cemetery. The workers buried there were interred with respect. Some had simple grave goods. Some were buried in a way that indicated genuine social status. These were not the burials of enslaved disposable labor. These were the burials of skilled craftsmen who were valued, cared for, and honored. The red ochre marks inside the pyramid itself confirm this. Inspection graffiti found above the king's chamber, in spaces that were sealed during construction and never meant to be seen by anyone, carry the names of the work gangs that built those sections. Names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. Not the marks of people performing forced labor under threat of violence. The marks of workers who were proud enough of what they were building that they signed their names to it in a place where no one would ever see, except future archaeologists armed with cameras inserted through boreholes, which is exactly how these inscriptions were accessed and documented by Hawass's team in 2025. But knowing who built the pyramids and understanding how they physically accomplished it are two different questions. And the how remained genuinely mysterious for one very simple reason. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The heaviest blocks, the granite ceiling beams of the king's chamber, weigh up to 80 tons each. The granite used for those beams came from quarries at Aswan, 800 kilometers upstream. The fine white limestone used for the outer casing came from Tura, on the opposite bank of the Nile. The sheer logistics of moving those materials to a building site on a desert plateau seemed, for centuries, to defy explanation. And one question above all others went unanswered. Why were the pyramids built where they are? Not on the banks of the Nile, where water access would be easy, but on a desert plateau that today is miles from the river. How did the builders get the stone there? On May 16, 2024, a team of researchers led by Professor Emin Ghonem of the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, published a paper in the peer-reviewed journal Communications, Earth, and Environment that answered that question with satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, electromagnetic tomography, and physical soil cores drilled from the desert floor. What they found, buried under centuries of sand, invisible to optical cameras but perfectly visible to radar wavelengths that penetrate the ground, was a river. An ancient, now extinct branch of the Nile that once flowed directly alongside the pyramid fields. They named it the Ahrimat branch, Ahrimat being the Arabic word for pyramids. And what it revealed was staggering. The Ahrimat branch was not a small stream. At its widest points, it was more than half a mile across. At its deepest, it reached over 80 feet. It stretched for approximately 64 kilometers, running alongside the sites of 31 pyramids, including the Great Pyramid of Giza, that are now stranded in the middle of an inhospitable desert strip. Causeways from at least 4 major pyramids, including Khafra's pyramid at Giza, run perpendicular from the pyramid sites directly to the riverbank of the Ahrimat branch, terminating at what were once valley temples used as river harbors. The pyramid builders did not haul 80-ton granite blocks across the desert. They floated them down a river that no longer exists. The stone arrived by boat, exactly as Merer's diary described, exactly where the causeways indicated, along a waterway that satellite radar has now physically mapped beneath the modern landscape. The reason the Ahrimat branch disappeared is also now understood. Geological analysis of the sediment cores shows that a combination of tectonic activity, increasing accumulation of wind-blown desert sand, and a massive regional drought that began approximately 4,200 years ago, a climate event now known to have caused the collapse of multiple civilizations simultaneously across the ancient Near East, caused the river to migrate eastward and eventually dry up entirely. The pyramid builders were not supernatural. They were extraordinarily lucky. They had a river running right next to their building sites. When that river disappeared, the era of massive pyramid construction ended. The geography that made the pyramids possible vanished, and the pyramids stopped. And then there is the question of what is inside the pyramid. Because even with the workforce identified, the logistics solved, and the materials traced, the internal architecture of the Great Pyramid still holds mysteries. The main known chambers, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, were mapped centuries ago. But in 2017, using a technology called muon tomography, an international team of scientists from the Scan Pyramids project discovered something no one had detected in 4,500 years of the pyramid's existence, a previously unknown void inside the Great Pyramid, at least 30 meters long, located above the Grand Gallery. They called it the Big Void. It was detected not by drilling or excavating, but by measuring the cosmic ray particles called muons that constantly rain down from the upper atmosphere, passing through solid matter but deflecting slightly when they encounter open spaces. By positioning muon detectors inside and around the pyramid, the team could map the density variations in the stone above them. And the Big Void appeared as clear as a shadow. What is in the Big Void? As of 2025, Hawaas's team has inserted a snake camera through a borehole to look inside. The preliminary footage showed quarry marks, the same kind of graffiti found elsewhere in the construction, and no evidence of hidden chambers, treasure, or anything supernatural. The most likely explanation is a structural void left during construction, either a relieving chamber like those above the King's Chamber, or a space created by the internal ramp system that may have been used to raise the upper portions of the pyramid. This explanation is supported by a separate 2025 study published in January 2026 by researcher Dr. Schuring, who proposed that the Great Pyramid was built not with external ramps, which would have needed to be almost as large as the pyramid itself to reach the upper levels, but with an internal network of counterweights and pulley-like systems that operated within the structure as it rose. The asymmetric positioning of the King's and Queen's chambers, which sit slightly off-center in ways that are difficult to explain with conventional external ramp theories, fits naturally within Schuring's internal construction model. And in September 2025, a peer-reviewed study published in the journal PLOS One by Xavier Landreau and colleagues proposed yet another layer to the construction picture. Examining Egypt's earliest pyramid, the Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, built approximately 4,700 years ago, Landreau's team suggested that a primitive hydraulic system, using water channeled through shafts inside the pyramid, may have been used to raise heavy stone blocks. The research integrates hydrology, geology, and civil engineering with the archaeological evidence, and while it does not claim to solve the entire construction question, it adds a further piece to a picture that is becoming clearer with every passing year. Not a single alien required, not a single supernatural force invoked. Ancient Egyptians solving engineering problems with water, ropes, sledges, canals, administrative genius, and tens of thousands of skilled and willing workers, building structures so precisely engineered that the base of the Great Pyramid is level to within 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter width. That last number deserves its own moment of silence. The base of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure built 4,500 years ago by workers using copper tools and wooden sledges on a desert plateau without GPS, without lasers, without digital surveying equipment, is level to within 2.1 centimeters across a distance of 230 meters. The four sides differ in length by an average of less than 5 centimeters. The pyramid is aligned to true north to within 0.067 degrees of accuracy. These are not the margins of primitive construction. They are the margins of extraordinary engineering competence by people who had mastered geometry, astronomy, logistics, and material science to a degree that the modern world is only now beginning to fully appreciate. The evidence is not a theory. It is a diary written by a man who did the work. It is a river found buried under the desert by satellite radar. It is workers' villages excavated stone by stone. It is bones that show medical treatment and diets that show respect. It is names painted in hidden chambers by people who were proud of what they built. It is cosmic particles from outer space, mapping voids inside stone that have been sealed for millennia. It is the oldest papyrus ever found in Egypt, recording the exact year, the exact journey, the exact cargo, the exact destination. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built by ancient Egyptians. Paid workers, skilled craftsmen, seasonal farmers, brilliant engineers, and the most sophisticated administrative system the ancient world had yet produced. All organized by a government that could mobilize tens of thousands of people, feed them, house them, pay them, give them medical care, and direct their labor with a precision that modern archaeologists are still struggling to fully map. Not slaves, not giants, not aliens, Egyptians. And the proof has been sitting in the sand, the sediment, and the stone all along, waiting for the right tools, the right technology, and the right scientists to find it. They found it.